Hello. Hello, everybody. Today we are doing our midday recharge with Reverend David Schwartz. I always forget what to say. The prefix, is it pastor or reverend? But it's Reverend. And we'll have him correct me if I'm wrong. So today we were going to do a little bit of desk yoga. And then we will cut to my interview where we're going to talk about how religion and faith plays a role in the current time. So this was recorded a couple months ago, but prior to the election. But I think what we really talk about is, how to have faith and what role does faith have in our society and how has it evolved. So I think you're gonna love it. I love it. I love talking to David any chance I get. I never thought I would go to church again after being raised Catholic, but turns out there are places with liberal religious values and that kind of allow you to come as you are. So, when I tell my friends I go to church, they're usually really confused. Uh, I don't think it's because they think I'm a bad person. I think it's because they just, you know, I don't fit the mold of who they typically think would go to church. So, if you too also think I'm not a church person or I don't go to church or you're confused as to why I would go to church, it'll be a great session for you. If you have any questions, pop them in the chat, either on the Zoom or on the Instagram Live. And at the end, David is going to join us live and he will answer all of your questions, or you can just ask your questions live at the end. So let's start. I know a lot of you are working today. I am, and I sit at my desk a lot, and it makes me super stiff. So let me make sure, I want to make sure, okay, everybody can see me. Wonderful. Let's start by at the top here. So go ahead, and I like to sit at the very edge of my chair so that I can have a nice tall spine. So my sit bone's on the edge of my chair, my knees at a 90-degree angle, so my ankles above my knees above my ankles, above my feet. Let's take a few grounding breaths. So place your hands on your thighs and take a deep breath in through the nose, out through the mouth. One more time, in through the nose. Big sigh out through the mouth. And then we're going to drop our right ear to our right shoulder. And if you want, you can take your right hand to the top of the head and just gently encourage the ear towards the shoulder. Make sure your shoulder's not going up towards your ear. Drop it way and down. And the idea is to have a stretch in the side of your neck here, okay? And you can move the chin a few centimeters one way and then the other, like wiggling until you find a really sticky spot. And then you can hang out there for a little bit until you feel some release. Going to the other side, dropping the left ear to the left shoulder, reaching the left hand on top of the head, and encouraging the head to drop to the left. Rocking the chin down or up. Hanging out in any spot that needs some extra attention. And just breathe into it. I'm noticing some big differences between my two sides. Slowly come back to center. Let's take a couple shoulder rolls. Inhaling the shoulders up. Exhaling, sliding them down the back. Inhale up. Exhale, slide the shoulder blades down. One more time. And let's reverse the direction. Now we're going to stretch out the front of the chest, so reach your arms behind you and go ahead and clasp your opposite elbows here. Okay? And then you may notice that your spines come out like this, so realign your vertebrae so they're stacked on top of each other. Spread your collarbones. I'm going to have a little guy come visit us. It's a treat today. And then take a breath. Hey, buddy, you want to join us for some stretching?
Is this yours?
Yeah, that's mine. And then we'll release that, and we will stretch to the other direction. We can't use the vacuum right now, okay?
Why?
Because Mommy's doing her video. So take your right hand under your right seat. Okay. Left arm up and over. Stretching out the side body. Letting the shoulders slide back and down. Breathing into the side body. And switching directions. Left hand comes under your left seat. Right arm up and over. Breathe in. Breathe out. Breathe into that side body. Breathe out. And release. Now take your right knee. I'm going to move back so you can see me. You can grab behind the thigh or in front of the shin. I want you to pull it in towards your chest as you spread the collarbones wide. And then just tuck your chin a little bit, keeping your spine in one long line. Taking a deep breath in. Breathe out. Go ahead and take your ankle and cross it over the top of your quad. I already feel a pretty good stretch here in my hip, but if your body invites you to stretch a little more, making sure you flex your right foot. Breathe in for a tall spine, and then exhale, hinge forward. You should feel a nice stretch in your right hip. Take 3 slow, long, intentional breaths here. Before we transition out of this, see if you can invite in a twist. So take your left hand to the outside of the right thigh. I'm going to put my right hand on my armchair here, and then just gently twist to look over my right. And then unwrap towards center. Let's do the other side. Bring the left knee in, grab behind the thigh or behind or in front of the shin, and pull that in as you spread your collarbones. Tuck the chin for a nice long spine. Breathe in. Squeeze tighter. One more breath. And then let's bring the left ankle on top of the right thigh. Flex the left foot. Inhale, nice tall spine. And as you breathe out, you hinge forward until your hip says, that's enough. And maybe you back off a little bit. And take 3 slow, long, intentional breaths here. And place, oh yes, and then we're going to do a gentle twist. So take your right hand to the outside of the left thigh, left hand behind you or on your arm of your chair, and gently twist to the left, looking over the left shoulder. Breathe in, breathe out. Coming back to center, releasing that, and we'll do one final stretch. So this time we're gonna do a forward fold, but seated. So I want you to spread your knees wider than hips width. And inhale, tall spine. And as you exhale, you're gonna hinge forward all the way until your head's between your knees. And you can let your arms hang down, grabbing opposite elbows. Feel the earth under your feet. Plant your feet and take 3 long, intentional breaths here in your forward fold, letting your head and neck go completely. And slowly, one vertebra at a time, roll back up. Let the eyes remain closed or soft, gentle gaze. Tall spine. And just acknowledge any shifts in your energy, in your mental, physical, or emotional body from when you first joined today. It's amazing how much just a few breaths and some movement can really shift things. I feel like I'm starting to come down with a cold that's going around our house, and that just like hit the spot for me. So I hope you feel the same way. Okay, now bear with me. I am going to share my screen, and we are going to start. There we go. The recording. So now we're gonna watch our interview with David. So
we could start by
here we go.
Specifically about UU and what the beliefs are, because I think like a lot of people have never heard of it and they won't know church can be this way. You know, it needs to be the beliefs of a church. Yeah.
Let me head in that direction and say a little bit about myself in the process too.
Yeah, let's do it.
So I grew up outside of Boston, and my dad is an X-ray astrophysicist. My mom is a third grade teacher, and both of them, when they were teenagers, had left the traditions that they grew up in totally disillusioned because for whatever good there was or community was there, their experience was in order to be part of this community, in order to be good enough, in order to be accepted, in order to be okay, you have to believe things that your experience and education clearly contradict. Whether that was about the sciences or patriarchy, I mean, the list goes on. But when my older sister and I were little, they wanted some sort of foundation in spiritual practice, in community, in values for us that didn't require us to go through the same thing that they had gone through.
And that's kind of where I am right now. Is like where your parents were. Yeah.
Right. Totally.
And like I want to give them something, but I know what it does. I don't want it to look like. I don't want it to look
right, it's so clear. Here are these things that you're not going to pass forward.
Yeah.
So Unitarian Universalist, this 200-year-old denomination, was founded in New England way back when. So out around Boston.
Where you're from.
Exactly. There are tons of UU churches.
Oh, interesting.
So my mom had a friend who was teaching religious education, and I started going, and my experience as a kid there, in a lot of ways, is the same sort of experience that I get to try and create, make space for other people to experience now at the UU Church in Boulder. And what that was and what that is, although like as a kindergartner, this is not the way that I would have explained it. But it's like this space where you get to be in community, in relationship. You get to ask big questions and be in ritual experiences sometimes that change you from the outside in, or insights, personal insight that changes you from the inside out. And that you don't have to leave some part of yourself behind to do that. Like we grew up.
Hide part of yourself.
That's exactly right. Like you don't have to mask. I think of it sometimes like I spent 10 years in corporate learning and development at Target. And I remember at the same time that I was on this path to ministry, and I remember like I loved the work actually. Like there were interesting problems to solve, and there were amazing people to work with, and there was this really clear sort of like ladder to keep on leveling up.
For sure.
Gratifying. And I would have moments from time to time in that experience where it's like, oh, wait a minute, this is interesting, this is satisfying in the moment. I only get to show up with this much of who I am here.
Yeah,
like
absolutely.
All these other parts of me.
Yeah, they're like that David can come to work, but like
exactly.
Yeah.
And sometimes, sometimes that was fine. Like that's what a job is. Yeah. That's okay. Yeah. And sometimes it felt like I am performing a version of myself. Mm-hmm. Like I'm putting on the David is a corporate consultant face, and and David is a corporate consultant clothes, and I feel like in the church community at its best, what it's doing is saying, bring every bit of who you are, including and especially like those parts of your identity that you have to mask elsewhere. I remember this like as a young parent I have an 8th grader and an 11th grader now, and I remember like when they were little, like I don't know how I made it through that, but being exhausted and overwhelmed and like chronically sleep deprived, and like loving these small infuriating humans.
That's a great way to describe it. Loving these small infuriating humans. Yeah.
Right. They're wonderful and overwhelming. And going like to work, because I was working at Target then, and sitting in my cubicle, I could not say to my coworkers like the whole complexity of that. Like that conversation could be 60 seconds about how great small children are, and then it was time to move on to the next thing. It's like that's okay, that's what that environment is, but I needed then a place where I could feel and experience and like unmask all of what I was going through. And for me, that was going to church then back in Minneapolis, and now that's so much of the work of creating it. For us as Unitarian Universalists, we're not connected because we all believe the same thing in the same way. There's not a creed, there's not a list of this is what you have to think. And on the one hand, it makes for like a really weird religious community.
Yeah.
Because so many denominations, that's what unites us, is we all have the same opinion about the Bible or God or Jesus or afterlife or all that stuff. And in the UU Church of Boulder, on any given Sunday morning, there is a Buddhist sitting next to a Christian, sitting next to a pagan, sitting next to a person who magic is their practice, and they've got their tarot set that they're consulting regularly and saying, all right, what do I need to know? And shoulder to shoulder, and we're not all arguing with each other of like who's got it right, Because the thing that connects us, like rather than the shared list of things we all believe the same way, is the shared set of values with love at the center, and then a shared commitment to work that out for ourselves, to practice that, to say, all right, we're all in this growing experience, and that looks different from one person to another. And instead of arguing about like who's got it right, like let's just do that work together. Let's compare notes, and it may be that my spiritual path is really different than yours, and that's okay because we're agreed on this sense of being, on the one hand, tiny little people in the midst of a vast, mysterious universe.
Yeah.
And on the other hand, being whole universes to ourselves, each of us, complex and rich and always in progress and change and growth and evolution. And if that's the frame, and I'm saying all of those things like metaphorically, not literally.
But also literally.
Yeah, right?
but like, I'm like, but also literally.
Right.
Both are important. Yeah.
I think that's totally the case. And someone told me once that they went to a congregation where they didn't believe most of like the theological points that were being said.
Yeah.
And they said something that surprised me. They said, but actually, that's not the most important thing, because I have an experience in the service of music that comforts and uplifts and transforms me, of words and ritual and community around me that like recharges my battery. And they're not asking me to believe every single thing exactly like they do, and that's okay, that's enough. And what he was saying is like he could translate that. And I mean, you can't do that in every religious community.
Yeah, but I have like spoken to people who are able to do that, and I can't, you know. But like at UU Church, I can, and I do like the like routine or the ritual like is extremely valuable, and we don't have a lot in our society, and I think like there's so much to be said about that, but I do think it's important. One thing my friend asked me that I think it'd be interesting to chat about is I was trying to explain the church to him and the sermons, and he's Mormon, and he's like, I don't understand, you know, like Mormon church, and it's similar to Catholic church, like you go and like you read a piece of scripture that typically like the sermon will be like they read a piece of scripture and then they talk about that piece of scripture and how it applies to everybody's life. And sometimes like in Catholic church, I remember they would just kind of like go through John. They're just like, we're doing John, you know, or whatever the part of the Bible is. I'm like, chapters? Are they chapters? And so anyways, but he's like, if you don't have a text, like in UU, there's no text, then like, what's a sermon? What's a sermon without like a text to draw from? So I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, goodness. So maybe not surprisingly, I was a philosophy major as an undergrad.
Shocking.
So with a little chagrin, right? But I remember there was a logic class that we had to take, like formal logic, like logic that's basically math.
Like proofs.
And yeah, exactly. And each day in the class, in the lecture, the professor would put this thing up on the board, but he put the proof on the right board, and then the class was sort of working through it, right? It's step by step, and it's all about something that's already been solved, that's already known, and the work of the class was to pass that knowledge from his head to all of our heads. And I feel that way sometimes about, you know, it sounds like that was some of the experience that you had, that a lot of folks have going to church, is that the sermon is sort of, here's this text, we already know everything there is to know about it, and I'm going to pass on to you what you need to know about it. And I feel like, for Unitarian,
what you can take away from it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Here are the three
implement
conclusions.
it in your life, and like here's how it'll help you.
And
sometimes
it's not that, like, I'm not doing that. It's not that I'm not trying to pass on something that is practically useful, but I feel like everything I'm doing is just about um, all of the problems and struggles and difficulties in each individual person's life. The joy and the triumph and the hidden grief that you're carrying around with you. Like, I don't know that stuff better than you know that stuff. Like, it feels like such, for me anyway, it feels like such ego to say like, oh, well, I've got the solution for you. Here it is, do this thing. Like, it would be nice if that's the way that life worked, but I don't really know that
simplifies some things.
That's not my experience of what being a person has been.
I guess this might segue to a question I have. For thinking about like balancing spirituality with modern life. So for like those who are feeling overwhelmed by modern life, like, especially like professional working moms, like, I guess if we could talk about like how, like, what would you recommend for those who are feeling overwhelmed and like want to reconnect with their sense of purpose?
Just that, huh?
Yeah, that's it. I mean,
I'm joking.
I mean,
but
like,
it's
it's a big question. Like, how the hell do we do this?
Yeah.
How do we do this?
Yes.
Yeah. Feel your feelings is part of it. Like, feel them in your body. That would be something I would say. But it's so much more than that. Like,
gosh, I think the first thing to say is for so many of us, and I think especially for moms, and especially for working women, especially for working moms, the expectation, the sense of what is good enough, how much do I have to do, perform, and output. I have to be perfectly compassionate to my children and also raise them to be brilliant, amazing, productive, ethical people. And I have to be perfectly put together. And I am being constantly judged on how I look from the outside. And I have to deliver not just at the level of my peers, but I have to do better than my male peers in order to be taken as seriously as they are, just because of who I am and how I am and where I am in the world. Like, all of those feelings and pressures are real. Yeah. And sometimes I think that folks find the way to move through those spaces by performing better and better. I'm gonna mask better. I'm gonna sleep less. I'm gonna exercise more. I'm constantly better, 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 better. And often I think that sense of I'm gonna do more, I'm gonna do better, in some ways it's a scary thing to confront, because for so many people that is the thing that got you to this moment. Like, I know, like, for me, that anxiety that was the thing that got me through college and grad school. That was the fuel that powered me in a corporate job. That was some of the fear that helped me get through those first years of parenting. Like, I'm not assuming that this is the root cause or issue or thing for everyone, but I can say for me, I think over the last few years, it's been so important to pause and say, okay, yeah, but where am I in all of that? And I feel like that's the starting point. I feel like the starting point is the recognition that something is not working. And that doesn't mean that your whole life has collapsed. It doesn't mean that, oh, now you're a bad parent, or you've lost your job, and maybe you feel these things or have experienced some, but like, something is not working. And for me, it's this sense of this path that I'm on is only going to take me so far. Like, I feel like in my 20s, that relentless achieve path, I really thought like, oh, that's going to get me covered for the whole rest of my life.
Yeah. I'm just going to go up the
exactly.
ladder, rake
I'll
in
do
the
that
money.
forever.
Yeah.
And there was a certain point where there was still plenty of ladder left to go, where for me, it's almost this intuitive sense that like, oh no, if I get better and better at masking, if I get better and better at being this much of myself, I'm going to get to a point in my life, and maybe that's soon, or maybe that is decades from now, where I just sort of look around and feel like, what the hell am I doing with myself? Like, who
is
am
this
I?
guy?
Exactly. What am I doing with myself? Is everything in balance?
So what did that look like as you shifted from target executive David to starting to integrate? I won't say you're integrated, but you're starting. Maybe you feel integrated.
No.
Moving towards Pastor David. Like, what were the things that you did?
The shift happened because I recognized that it wasn't working, and I started asking myself, what needs to change? You know, I was never getting ever a full night's sleep. I felt on the inside like no matter how much I had done, it wasn't enough. I felt like every accomplishment, rather than being something to be proud of, like that was the new floor. Like I'd done something really great. Now that was the worst I was ever allowed to do in the future. And it's like a horrible way to live with yourself. And so for me, it was the really big piece was around compassion for self and care for self. And it needed steady and constant reminder. Like what I always want out of life is that a switch just flips and everything is different. And for some people, that's their experience. It's never been my experience with anything, I don't think. And so it was this almost like daily practice of trying to of noticing those habits of thoughts and setting that stuff down. And, you know, for me, there are lots of different spiritual practices that I've been really drawn to over the years. And occasionally that's been in prayer in the sense of intention setting. What do I want to do different for me? And occasionally that's been meditation in the sense of like really deep listening. What if I can quiet all the things, all the inner monologues are quiet, what is the thing that then emerges that I need to do or pay attention to? And sometimes, often, that spiritual practice has felt like a physical sort of calming and regulation, being out in nature and slowing down to the pace of the world around me is a kind of meditation. It's kind of quieting. And often for me, because I grew up singing in a church choir and I sang in college and all that, and I'm not a great singer, but there's something that's happening in the practice of singing. I mean, physical that's happening. That's also like changing and settling and reconnecting me with source and self and others. And I feel like for me, the shift was doing all of that stuff. And first letting go of trying to do it all perfectly. But doing
all
that
at
stuff.
Once.
Exactly, right? Now I'm going to be perfectly in relationship with myself. Like, you know, to let that be process. And,
let's talk a little bit about like how you found like spirituality can like help with resilience. Like, so when we're kind of starting to touch upon that. So I think that might be fun to expand upon more. So like, the question was, how can spirituality help individuals develop resilience in the face of challenges such as stress, anxiety, or grief? So I think we could maybe talk about that a little bit in our own context, or like our experience, but also like what have you seen more broadly, like across your faith community?
I think of a few things. One is, I think, you talked earlier about this sense of compartmentalizing different pieces of yourself, right? Then my fear goes over here, and my anger about this thing goes over here, and my disappointment in this person goes over here, and neat little boxes on the shelf. And every time I feel those things, I just kind of stuff a little bit more, shove it to the back. And there's a fragility to that. There's a way that,
like
there are parts of yourself. Exactly. You're always under pressure. You're
they're gonna find out I'm a real person.
Exactly. Exactly. And that these things that I feel are overwhelming to me. Like I have to shove it off to the side because it's going to be shattering to feel all of what that is. And I think part of resilience is building that trust and skill to, I'm feeling this thing and I know it's not the end. I know that there's something after this. Like there's a kind of, I think there's a faith or a trust in that, which is not, I don't mean this like cosmically, like I'm having a bad day, but paradise awaits me after death, so I'll be fine. Like it's, I don't mean that. I mean,
which would be cool, but
right. That's your thing. Yeah. That's great. I don't know how to do that thing.
Yeah.
But a sense of I'm not alone in this. I am moving towards wholeness and integration. But this sense of nobody is ever permanently and completely kept free from all suffering whatsoever. It is.
Yeah, none of us get out of this world unscathed, right?
Right. But that, whatever name you call it, the divine, the holy, just the reality of living is present in the experience of suffering and emerging from suffering, of facing and holding and transforming suffering. Not the denial of it or the compartmentalization of it, but I think spirituality and spiritual practice is in part learning how to hold and confront and metabolize this stuff. And maybe in the moment, it can be as simple as, for me, like I've had moments where I'm feeling a particular thing and like a little line of a song that we sing regularly will just pop into my head, unbidden. My subconscious take care of this for me because of the regular practice. And I'll hear that thing to myself. It's like, okay. And that's different for different folks. And then over time, so there are those things in the moment. But then I also think, when I'm thinking of and putting together a Sunday service, often I and the other worship leaders are talking about how do we make space for the totality of life to be present in this thing, present in the room. What are the moments that everyone gets to feel all of what they're feeling? And I think it makes a difference to have, whether that's a religious community or your yoga studio, which is not just about exercise, but also about the internal transformation that's going on with that, or with your therapist, or to have dedicated and regular time week after week where you get to experience all of who you are and what you're about and be reminded of, what is the thread that I'm trying to follow here in my life? Like, I think that there's a certain kind of muscle.
Step back.
Yeah.
I agree. I think
it builds a capacity.
Yeah, exactly. So that you have some buffer. You can take that pause. Not every time, but like it starts to become, a habit. I think that's.
I think about that. I didn't mean to interrupt, but it just struck me. Like I remember with little kids who would wake loudly when they would wake, right?
Yeah, Mom!
I remember the difference
slamming doors and running down the hallway.
Totally. They have been awake for 30 seconds and there are so many problems already that need your attention.
Immediate resolution.
And like I remember what would happen in my body on 5 hours of sleep versus 7. Let's be realistic, not 8 hours, never 8 hours, like 7 hours of sleep then. And like the capacity that I had inside myself. And that moment, how long the moment of pause was of me saying, okay, they're gonna be okay, I'm gonna be okay.
Yeah.
We're gonna figure this out.
There's like no
Let's
pause
see what's going on.
when you're are able to, like, tend to our child's needs and like regulate our own nervous system and things like this, where without having to like regulate their nervous system or have them tiptoe around us because like we might react because we're tired or whatever.
Totally. And sleep builds that capacity.
Yeah.
I feel like such an old man saying, like, fruits and vegetables help build that capacity, right? And spiritual practice builds that capacity. Also, being in a community with other parents, being with other people who are going through what you're going through.
Yeah.
Being in a place where you don't have to mask, like, helps build that capacity.
Yeah.
I think the first piece of encouragement is that it's a learned skill. I mean, it's a practice. You practice and you get better and you figure out. I feel this often for folks who are coming to church for the first time, who haven't been since they were a kid in a really different tradition or haven't ever been. And sometimes I feel like, oh, it's hard to explain. Like, it's sort of a learned practice to get something out of being there.
Yeah, like you're not really going to get it your first time. It's going to be pretty uncomfortable, I think. At least for me. Like the first, even for a while, right? It's like, it just kind of takes a while to build community and like learn how you want to show up, like explore this new side of yourself. Yeah.
What I really want to say is, if you're looking for a spiritual community, I think it's try a few different places. Because it may be that a place you think doesn't work really does. It may be that, like my friend, you have to do a bunch of translating, but it's actually fine to do a bunch of translating. Yeah. I think, look for a community where, a better way to say it is, pay attention to what your gut feeling is walking in the door and being in that place. Do you feel like you get to show up with all of who you are? Do you feel like this community is judging you? I feel like, I don't know if this is a good example or not, but like, do you get the side eye if you walk in wearing Crocs?
Yeah.
I mean, maybe you want a community where everyone does that. That's okay. But like, I want a community where, man, if you rolled out of bed and you did not get out of the house on time, and actually your shorts are on backwards, and
when you come in late with the kids,
exactly,
your kids running laps around the service. Not that my child did that in the middle of
that you get just as warm and generous and kind of welcome, that they want you to be who you are when you come in, and it's not like, oh, you're welcome here as long as you mask this part of you, as long as you pretend that this isn't part of who you are. And sometimes that divide is around progressive and conservative, but I also think like there's a divide of kind and unkind churches, and find wherever you go, find a community of real kindness and care, and you'll feel that.
Absolutely.
Follow that.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much.
All right. Take good care. Good luck with everything.
Okay, let me get my everything sorted here. Hang on a second. Okay, I got my little guy with me. Hey, David.
Hey, how's it going?
Good. Let me try to get my screen sorted here. No easy feat. Little guy, my little man is home sick, so he's gonna join us. Is my screen still sharing?
Yes, I think so.
How do I stop that? Let's see. Oh, there we go. That should have done it.
Awesome.
Okay.
Hey, dude.
Yeah, Jake's. Of course, he's like, Mom's talking? I gotta sit on her lap right now. It was really fun to rewatch our interview because I totally forgotten what we talked about.
Yes, me too.
I don't know if you were able to watch I'm going in and out of focus. I don't know if you were able to watch the whole thing.
I showed up about 10 or 15 minutes late into it.
No, that's fine. But I was like, yeah, that's really interesting. So it was really fun to rewatch it. I'm gonna see if I can change my video settings here because we're going in and out of focus. But is there anything while I do that, is there anything you want to add or comment on about what we talked about, having rewatched part of it?
I mean, one of the things that strikes me that often strikes me is I want to do one thing and have everything change in my life. And the way my life has actually changed for the better is by doing like small things slowly over time, repeatedly. And man, I just need to hear that over and over and over again. Like there is no one giant intensive gesture that's going to transform it all. It's just little things over and over.
Yeah, yeah. I liked what we. I think it's something I haven't thought about in a while, but the idea that like spirituality helps build your resilience is, I think, I do feel that. I also wanted to. I don't think we talked at all about the religious education
Yeah.
aspect of UU,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
I think one thing that's like been really, yeah, let's not hit any buttons, been really helpful for me is to like I wanted my kids to have some sort of church,
Right.
or
Right.
values, some sort of community, but I knew it wasn't going to be what I grew up in, which was a Catholic church, and um, it just wasn't a good fit for me anymore. Um, so you know, we've been going a little over a year, and it does feel like community now, but it does take time to kind of like
Yeah.
feel at home. So I don't know if you want to talk a little bit more about. Hey, you gotta be quiet, okay? If you want to talk a little bit about like family and kids at
Yeah,
UU and in general, like spirituality with kids, how
totally.
you'd like to introduce it.
And one thing that comes to mind also is just how isolating it can be to raise kids and have a family, especially if you don't have extended family nearby. And uh, I really appreciated when I was a kid, my parents had family friends who were like grandparents to us. And I want my kids to be in that sort of community too. Um, but for spirituality, all of the spiritual feelings or experiences that we have as adults, like it's not like a switch flips on when you turn 18 and those things become possible. Like even the littlest little kids feel awe and wonder and grief and gratitude and um, mystery and beauty and community. Like, and I think for us, then the question and the work is just, well, how do you invite people into those experiences in an age appropriate way? Like the way that we might do that as adults with different attention spans, um, or different other faculties may be different than as kids, but it's just as much Jake's work as ours to feel and experience all of that stuff. Um,
Yeah, I agree. Um, Let me see if we got uh, any questions. So if anybody has questions, I have the. I'm also streaming on Instagram Live, although they can't see your face right now, but they were able to before. If anybody has
awesome.
questions, drop them in. Oh, are you okay? Yeah, like I said, he's not feeling great. Many of us, okay, here's a question. Many of us feel isolated, especially in high stress careers. What are some ways to build a real sense of community beyond just showing up at events?
Yeah, I think about I think about that in a few different ways. One of them is, um, thinking big in terms of community, but also starting small. That it takes time and it's about organic connection. And I think a piece of it that, often we talk about community as like just this unambiguously great thing, but also part of the work is finding like your people within a larger community. So like I think about in our context, we do the first Friday of each month, we do this potluck and different activities of different kinds. And like 30 to 40 people show up in every month. And like you're not automatically going to like and be friends with all of them. Like part of the work moving into those spaces isn't just about presence, like that's the entry ticket, but a big part of the work is finding like who do I click with? Who do I enjoy talking to? Who do I like spending time with? And maybe that's people you wouldn't expect. And maybe it is, and that's okay. Who are the other parents? Who are the other people who have clearly come here directly from work, like still all in work mode, like obviously stressed out still from the day, like maybe those are the people to just sit down and I think then, you know, the other start of community building is I think often we move through those spaces and the sorts of small talk questions that we're used to are really questions that are about like classifying people or like questions that can be answered by their LinkedIn profile, like how, where did you go to school and where do you live now and what ages are your kids? And it's not that those things are automatically bad, but sometimes instead of that, I think of that like what if the person you're talking to was an old friend who you hadn't seen for a couple of years? What questions would you ask that person? Like how are you doing? What is life like for you these days? You
Yeah,
know?
I'm getting spit on. That's how my
Yeah, right. And then that like
life. Yeah,
that's that's real. That's wanting to
real
connect with
talk, like a layer,
you.
the reason underneath the reason, or the what's going on
Totally.
beneath the surface level. Totally. I
Totally.
love that. Like, I feel like a spiritual community is really unique in that whatever one spiritual community is that they choose is one place where we get together across generations,
Yeah.
and that's really cool. Like, the perspective from younger people and older people and people at different stages of life. So, and I know that I do love seeing like some of the grandparents. You could tell they're enjoying watching Jake wiggle around and me in my arms and cause a scene in church and stuff. So that's fun.
Totally. Totally. And I mean, other people can have different opinions, but I feel really strongly that if you're looking for a religious community, spiritual community, like find one where that's really okay, where it's not like, what? Why isn't your child perfectly still and silent? Like, no,
Yeah, because they're a child.
yeah, exactly.
I know, I know. Yeah, so having that place where we can just kind of like be ourselves is
Yeah.
really amazing. Um,
Yeah.
we have, okay, just a couple more minutes because I have to end right on the hour. But I did have one more question that came in that I think um, would be fun to address. Uh, okay, well, I'm going to change it actually because a different one, there's a different one that's even better. So life feels really uncertain right now, both globally and personally. How can we stay hopeful and grounded when everything feels chaotic? I know we've been talking about this at the Sunday services. So
Yeah, no, it's so, so, so real right now. I feel like that. Um, One of the things for me that comes to mind is sometimes when life feels overwhelming and chaotic, you kind of get stuck inside your head. Like you get stuck in loops of anxiety or sort of perseveration, or trying to find the way out, or like playing it forward into the future, how everything is going to go terribly forever. I recognize I'm not helping so far, Um, and I think one of the important things to do in that is to get out of your head and back into the world again. Part of that's getting back into your body again. Movement can be helpful, breath can be helpful. Getting, even something as simple as exhaling longer than you inhale for regulates your nervous system. Singing involves exhaling longer than you inhale, so it does a great job with that. Um, and then I also think from that place of being in your body, um, it's really, really important in times of feeling overwhelmed and stressed out, where the world feels chaotic and going terribly, to stay connected with joy and delight and laughter. And probably, I know for me, it's so much easier to stay with the bad stuff than to actually embrace and experience the good stuff. And um, I think of that old line, I don't want to be part of any revolution where there's not dancing.
Yeah.
Or I don't, right? I want to, I don't want to just not be overwhelmed. I don't want to run away from the reality of difficult things, but I want to be able to hold that stuff and to hold joy and delight at the same time. So every day I'm putting myself into situations where I get stressed out and overwhelmed. Like that just happens automatically reading the news. How do you get more intentional about putting yourself in situations of joy and delight?
Yeah. Yeah, I totally agree. I think uh no, just leave it, please. I think those techniques have been really helpful for me and have been why I started the yoga business. Was that,
Yeah.
I was stressed out and overwhelmed and burned out, and yoga offered me a lifeline to come into the present moment
Yeah.
through movement and breath and meditation. And there's a variety of ways to do that, but it was a way that worked for me. And then I was like, I need to share this with people.
Absolutely, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, it's been so lovely. I could chat with you all day, David, and
But
I'm sure
likewise.
we will chat again. I think this is just the beginning, but I really appreciate your time. I'm gonna send you. We'll go ahead and wrap up for now, and then we're gonna post this on YouTube. So anybody who wasn't able to join live or wants to watch again will be able to access it there. So thank you so
It is.
much.
Thanks so much. I just love these conversations, and I'm so glad that this is the work you're doing. This is important stuff, and it's fun to get to be a part of it. Thank you.
All right, you take care.